especially following these really quiet periods in any asset, is that when you get that break, it's explosive.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Daily Crypto. We are joined by Gareth Soloway once again, and he will be sharing with us his latest technical analysis on Bitcoin. But before we get started with the interview, let's take a look at the Fear and Greed Index for today. As of recording this video, it is sitting at 23, same as yesterday. Currently Bitcoin and Ethereum are trading for 18,960 and 1,277 respectively. With that out of the way, let's jump right into the video.
I'm kind of in the camp where I still am in thinking we have a near-term pump, right? So I do think that complacency is there. I think there's a lot of bears out there in Bitcoin and crypto land. And so for me, looking at the charts, it also confirms it. In fact, let's bring up a chart right now so we can take a look. So what we basically have is this beautiful wedge pattern, right? You take the highs going back to May, it connects perfectly to the high in August, which then connects perfectly to September, and then all the way through here. And then same thing from the June low, you can kind of connect these lows. Now, what you're seeing here in the near term is this hammering on this resistance line. And I'm in the camp that I do think eventually we're gonna break through this, which will give us a near term, and I stress near term, but a near term pop, potentially as high as 20,000. The reason I'm getting 25,000, the reason I'm getting 25 is basically by taking a parallel from these lows and stretching it up and basically looking like this would be the upper range of that parallel line connected through this point here. So I think that's a possibility. I think that would get a lot of people very, very bullish. But one of the things we have to recognize is that this, and even a pop to 25,000, it's still inside of a macro bearish pattern, right? So you have the down move here, all inside bar action, even up to here, and therefore my midterm is still for further downside. So I'm near-term bullish, midterm still bearish. I still don't think we have a bottom in Bitcoin yet.
Gareth reveals he is bullish on Bitcoin in the short term, as Bitcoin looks like it will break out to the upside and test the 25K zone. However, it is still in a macro bearish pattern which will eventually break to the downside, which is why Gareth says he is bearish on Bitcoin in the midterm and expects it to go to the 12 to 13K level.
So I understand the midterms angle and the Fed angle right there, but really if we look at the chart, what's so interesting is that the wedge pattern ends, and this is where the point is, right around the October 29th-ish area. What that tells me is that you're going to either get a breakout or a breakdown between now and then, right? I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow or if it's going to be on the 29th, but price is going to be forced out of this wedge pattern. And usually what we see, especially following these really quiet periods in any asset, is that when you get that break, it's explosive. So again, you know, my guess is we actually see the beginning of the move before the Fed and before the midterms. Whether or not it continues in that direction when we get the Fed in the midterms, that's another story. But I think it actually will happen probably in the next week, as we see here by the 29th.
Since the wedge pattern that Bitcoin is forming is tightening with every passing day, Gareth thinks that by 29th of October it will either break above or below, and it will be an explosive move. Since charts tend to predict the fundamental news catalysts, it could have something to do with the Fed or some other macro factor.
Basically what I was showing here is you can see today alone, this is the 10-minute chart, you can see when the dollar was falling, we did see Bitcoin rally up, and then as the dollar bounced back and went higher, we saw Bitcoin kind of come down. So you do see that, you know, kind of that opposite move going on. But the interesting thing, and you're bringing up a really good point here, is that if we go to the daily chart, you're not seeing, the dollar's been going higher quite a bit, but Bitcoin's not going lower in the bigger time frame. And the positive to that, I don't think it's manipulation. I think it's a combination of, number one, you do see a little accumulation probably by smart money here. Number two, I do think that with all the currency issues going on, so we see the dollar. I mean, look at some of these charts. Let's go back to charts. Like, let's look at the USD JPY. I mean, look at this move up in the dollar yen. So you have that. Then you have the Bank of England already intervening because the pound is collapsing. Then you have the euro, which is now below par with the dollar. And I really think that some of these other citizens of these countries are probably putting a little bit of money into Bitcoin to try to protect themselves from what's going on with the dollar and their own currency. So I think there's a combination, but either way, it's a really healthy thing for Bitcoin to do. right? I love when Bitcoin starts to behave abnormally from what we're used to, and that's what we've seen on the daily chart recently.
Till now we have seen an inverse relationship between the dollar and Bitcoin. This can be seen in the 10-minute chart that Gareth shows. However, if we look at them on a bigger time frame, it can be observed that Bitcoin is not breaking below and seems to be holding up to a rising dollar. According to Gareth, this is actually a very good thing because it indicates that Bitcoin is gaining strength and breaking free from the grip of the DXY.
So I think it's important to kind of have an open mind where, especially on an asset as recent as Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, I mean, yes, it's been 4-year cycles, but there's only been 3 of them, right? So, I mean, it's only been around for 12, 13 years. So you don't have that history of like a stock market or anything. And by the way, I think we have to kind of recognize that you had stock market cycles that were intact, and then the Fed started printing in 2009, and we really didn't have a bear market for 13 years until now. And so what that does to me is it kind of says, maybe we have to be open to things changing here. Maybe the cycle won't be as short as past bear markets because we know that the Fed is not printing money like the past cycles. So you could argue very easily that the Fed kept the cycle intact because they were always printing money, but now they're not. Does that mean the cycle could be longer? So I think as a trader, and I think you would agree with this, is that you never want to hold yourself into that rigid, this is what it is, so it's always going to be like that. Kind of just go with it and then look for the chart to signal when it's finally bottomed, whether it's a flush out, whether it's panic, and that creates that bottom, the volume patterns, the bottoming tails, all those different signals, and then let that kind of dictate whenever that is.
Many crypto investors are questioning whether Bitcoin performed the same as it did in its previous cycles. The simple answer to that is no, because Bitcoin is a very new asset and it has only been around for 3 cycles, during which the Fed was printing billions of dollars. Now that they have stopped, it will obviously have an impact on the Bitcoin cycle as investors will have less money to play around with.
It's a tricky scenario, right? Because you have certain things that are going to come up with the Federal Reserve. So number one is they're going to at some point stop hiking, and that's going to be that first pivot. But stopping hiking and keeping interest rates, let's say the Fed funds rate is at 4% at that point, that doesn't equate to printing money again. It's just they stopped raising. So that's kind of that first pivot. Then the next pivot would be when the economy really starts getting into a bad recession. They'll start dropping rates, which does increase liquidity in the system, but it's not quantitative easing yet, right? And so then you have that final one, which I do think would create that bull market again for sure, which is where they actually start quantitative easing again. So there's kind of like a 3-step to the Fed turning things around, which then would create that bull market. And by the way, I don't necessarily think Bitcoin needs that to have a bull market. It's just really, really helpful.
As soon as the Fed starts to pivot, the reduced interest rates will once again boost the economy, as well as the crypto space. Bitcoin will have a bull rally regardless of how the Fed proceeds in the future, but some positive measures will definitely help it start much faster.
So believe it or not, so I was originally in the 12. Well, once we got to 20, I said, okay, now 12 to 13,000 is my upside, my high end target. Now everyone's saying that, and that makes me nervous. I'm like, okay, it's either not going to get there or it's going below. I'm in the camp that it probably goes below. And so interestingly enough, I'll show you where my current kind of zone will be, and it is below 10,000. So certainly I'm still a buyer below 10,000. But let's take a look. Let's do a trend line here. And if we go to our weekly chart and we go back here, so let's take a look here, right? So what if we take just before the first bull run in 2017, we put a little trend line and we connect it through this low, all the way through there. And that target is right around, let's say, 8,000. Now, it's an upsloping trend line, so in a few months, it'll be slightly above that. But that's kind of like where I could see this thing coming back to that longer-term trend, and it makes a lot of sense. And I'm in the camp where, like, if you really think about other bear markets, like in the U.S. and the stock market in 2009, I mean, there was literal panic out there. People wouldn't even open up their trading platforms. It was so nasty, right? And you go back to the .com collapse, same thing. You go back to various commodity collapses. And I don't think we've seen that in crypto. Like, I don't see people saying crypto's done, it's over, it's not going to be anything. And that's what, to me, would mark a bottom. So I kind of feel like we need to almost go below 10,000 just to get that fear and panic and people kind of throwing in the towel effect. and then maybe we can actually see a bottom. So I actually do think we probably do pierce 10,000.
Gareth has been predicting 12 to 13K Bitcoin for a long while now, and almost everyone else has started to say the same. This worries Gareth because whenever people are certain of a price point, it either never reaches there or goes below it. We could see something similar with Bitcoin, which is why Gareth thinks it could drop to as low as $8,000. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss any of our latest videos. See you guys in the next one.